Okay, let's talk about the Rat Queen. Who is Jane? Jane's a rat.
Kurwa, ratatuj, poczekaj! Ratatuj!
But more importantly, this rat is a cop who is also a physical anomaly agent. She makes assaults crit using her nod state and enters passion to increase her own attack, anomaly application rate, and use a special attack called Salcho Jump, which is apparently a figure skating move. I was very confused until Chad explained it to me. So we should start by talking about Jane's passion state. So if you look at the top of your bar with Jane, or top of your screen with Jane, there is a bar. This bar is blue, and when it is full, it becomes orange, and there's a circle next to it. That's passion. When Jane triggers perfect dodge, defensive assist, or does any damage, she accumulates passion stream. When her passion stream is full, she enters the passion state. While in the passion state, Jane's physical anomaly buildup rate is increased by 25%, and her attack increases by up to 600, depending on her anomaly proficiency. The formula for that is anomaly proficiency minus 120 times 2. When Jane enters passion, she gains the ability to use Salcho Jump. I don't remember. Salcho, is it Salcho or Salcho? I already forgot. By holding the basic attack input. Passion is depleted as Jane does damage. It can be regenerated during the passion window with perfect dodges and defensive assists. When she hits enemies at all, they enter the nod state. Nod is a debuff that allows assaults to crit. So because this is a debuff, it means any characters can contribute to the assaults. So basically this just means that Jane can enable any assault proc to crit, even if she isn't the sole builder of the assault anomaly, and she doesn't have to be the one to trigger it. So this is useful to know if you wanted to play Jane with someone like Piper or any other physical character. Those assaults can crit. The crit for the assault starts at 40% crit rate at core F, and the crit damage of this is fixed at 50%. The crit rate increases with Jane's core passive level and her anomaly proficiency. At max, it is 0.16 crit rate per anomaly proficiency. As long as you play with Seth, this will always be 100% crit rate, so your assaults will crit at 100% crit rate. Your assaults will just do 50% more damage. TLDR. TLDR, if you play Jane, assaults do 50% more damage. We don't have to complicate it. Assaults critting, it sounds really cool, but ultimately it's 50% more damage. Like, comment, subscribe. We're gonna try to do more Zenless content. More Genshin content is coming. Did you know most of you watching are not currently subscribed? You should subscribe. Since we talked about Jane's core, we should also talk about her additional ability. Her additional ability is activated by having any anomaly agent or cop in the squad. This increases her anomaly buildup rate by 20%, and for the duration of enemies suffering any anomaly attribute or any attribute anomaly, she gets an additional 15% buildup rate. So this is plus 35% anomaly buildup rate, plus 35% anomaly buildup rate is massive. You should always have this active, and it does somewhat limit Jane's teams, but not really. Since Jane is an anomaly character, you may think you don't need to level any of her skills, which is technically correct damage-wise. But you are constantly doing 3 types of damage at all times to enemies: literal HP, daze HP, and anomaly HP. So even though Jane is an anomaly character and is not directly doing damage with her skills, you need to level up most of her skills so they can apply daze or do daze damage to the enemies and contribute to stun. That does not mean you need to take them all the way to 12, but I would highly recommend leveling them to like 10 out of 12 at minimum. For her basic attack especially. The other ones you can kind of get away with skimping on, but just keep in mind it is important, or it can be important. The anomaly application rate does not increase with skill level, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just daze. It's just for daze and a little bit of damage. How do we play Jane? Jane is primarily an on-field DPS character, much like Piper. So you want to use Jane's normal attacks as much as you can while she is in the passion state. You can try to regenerate the passion state during the duration of passion by using dodge counters and defensive assists. You don't really have to worry about that because her chain always fills her passion and puts her directly into the passion state. You don't really need to be conservative with it. So you can just play Jane as an on-field DPS and use a character's defensive assist to build up days value. The character that is sharing a banner with her, the A-ranked Seth, is a great contender for this because he also has a quick assist on his assist follow-up that instantly puts Jane back into the driver's seat. So you can be doing Jane normal attacks, see an attack coming, defensive assist, immediately be Jane again. That's really useful, especially if you're on mobile and can't backswap. So yeah, I think Seth is very good. He's also a stun character, so yeah, that's cool. So as an on-fielder, Jane tries to trigger Assault as much as possible, and triggering Assault on top of other anomalies for disorder damage. In some cases, not all teams, especially on release, will be reliably triggering disorders, but that's not a big deal. The assaults themselves are more than enough. So as I was saying earlier, you can play Jane like Ellen and have her be a selfish field time character and use defensive assists to primarily build up your days value. This is what I currently recommend playing Jane, or the way I currently recommend playing Jane. We'll see how well that ages, but that's what I'm currently recommending. After stun, Jane's chain attack allows her to instantly enter passion and recover her Selcha jump. Basically, you're always good to go for stun. You don't need to worry about not having your resources available. The EX special specifically has a ton of anomaly buildup compared to some other attacks, so it might be a good idea to save some of her EX specials for the stun state. Anomaly damage and buildup are somewhat complicated. Since this is our first time talking about an anomaly character, I'm going to quickly TLDR them. Anomaly damage uses your attack, your damage percent, your anomaly proficiency, and your pen percent to do damage. And your level. So it goes through essentially everything besides crit, and crit is replaced by anomaly proficiency. But another TLDR is anomaly mastery is the other anomaly stat, which is your build-up rate. Anomaly mastery is basically your attack, and build-up rate is your damage percent, if you want to put this into those terms. It's a very similar relationship to impact and days percent buffs. Or impact percent and days percent, where impact is the attack stat and days percent is the damage percent stat. So as you build anomaly build-up rate, it's a very good stat and can directly create anomaly procs. Anomaly procs are very complicated. So the game internally has an anomaly application value for every hit, or anomaly build-up rate for every hit, and that gets multiplied with your anomaly mastery and your build-up rate to determine how much anomaly you apply per hit. However, that itself does not directly create the anomaly procs because the anomaly proc rates are threshold based. Each enemy, or most enemies, have different anomaly thresholds, and that increases for each anomaly procced. This is way too dank, but I do have this stuff outlined in the Jane calculator that's attached to the top of our FAQ here. If you want to try to go through it, you can. You just adjust the hit counts, and it'll tell you, and all of your buffs, and it'll tell you how much anomaly you're applying, and you can cross-reference the tables here to determine how many assault procs that is. Assault also has different build-up requirements than the other anomalies, I guess because Assault is just better, but it requires more build-up, but whatever. The physical anomaly characters also apply more by default. So what does that really mean? It's more difficult to proc anomaly against bigger enemies than smaller enemies, basically. Okay, that was very complicated. Let's simplify things a bit by talking about W engines. Surely this will be simple, right? What do you mean her S-rank W engine gives anomaly build-up? Sharpened Stinger is Jane's S-rank W engine. It is her best in slot engine by a margin that is very high, but how high is difficult to gauge because of the 40% anomaly build-up rate. If you get an extra assault every 3, it's like a 40% damage increase over the next best option. That is a big if, but that is a somewhat reasonable assumption. The Sharpened Stinger is very good, TLDR. It's 20 to 40% estimated. That can change depending on where your baseline is, but yeah. What is the next best option? It's actually the Electro Lip Gloss. This is the Battle Pass weapon. It gives 75 anomaly proficiency, and it gives attack or final attack percent and damage percent when enemies are affected by anomaly. It's just solid. It's available on the battle pass if you buy it for the resources. That is, if you're willing to spend money and not pulling for her W engine. It's pretty good. The battle pass weapons in this game may not be the most pog thing ever, but Electro Lip Gloss is one of the better ones for sure. The next option I'd recommend is actually the Fusion Compiler. The Fusion Compiler is largely carried by just having 5-star or S-rank base stats. Doesn't even have full S-rank base stats, but you get the idea. Its pen ratio, its final attack percent, it's 784 base, and it gives anomaly proficiency every time you use your skill. You can try to weave base skills in to get more out of it. You really shouldn't. TLDR, it's good anyway and better than the A-rank options, just by its stats alone. When you use the Fusion Compiler or play at all with Rena, pen percent is Jane's best in slot drive main stat on slot 5. Now, the A-rank options that are free-to-play friendly, or free-to-play in general, because they're actually craftable, are the Rainforest Gourmet and the Weeping Gemini. The Rainforest Gourmet is the funny dino head. Tell Susie I said hi. We love Susie. The Rainforest Gourmet gives attack for consuming energy on EX Special. Jane's EX Special costs 60 energy. The Gourmet will provide 24 final attack percent. It's not bad. The Weeping Gemini is an attack main stat that gives 48 anomaly proficiency for every anomaly proc. This is triggered by any squad member triggering anomaly against an opponent. This is complicated and better in double anomaly teams, so it may not be immediately as good as the Rainforest Gourmet, but it can be as good or better than the Rainforest Gourmet in some other teams in the future. The anomaly proficiency buff does reset when a target resets from stun or dies. So I talked about drive discs a bit. Before we talk about sets, I actually want to talk about main stats first. Jane is an anomaly character. Slots 4 and 6 are spoken for. They are anomaly proficiency and anomaly mastery. This is not up for debate. That is not optional. What is up for debate and optional is your slot 5. You can use any of the three: Fizz percent, attack percent, or pen percent. If you play with Rena or use a pen percent main stat weapon, pen percent is the best option here. Otherwise, it's a toss-up between Fizz percent and attack percent, depending on your substats and your buffs. The more attack buffs you have, the more you'll want the other stats, yada yada. That's final or base attack buffs specifically, not final attack buffs, but yeah, whatever. Recommended substats, the two highest priority substats are attack percent and anomaly proficiency. That's just how it is. Pen and flat attack are fine too. I have a bit of a controversial take. I actually recommend Fanged Metal over Freedom Blues for Jane. I'm choosing to recommend this because Seth already debuffs enemy buildup resistance. However, you can also run Freedom Blues on a physical support character, not support, like someone like Piper or Caesar in the future. Freedom Blues so what Freedom Blues does is it's 20% build up Ray Shred after using an EX special for the element of the agent equipping the set. That is very good. It doesn't have to be on Jane is the thing. And the 20% build up resistance reduction may ultimately cause you to run into Anomaly's 3-second proc cooldown. Anomaly can only do damage once every 3 seconds. So if you fill up the Anomaly meter before this has happened, things will just stall out and you won't necessarily be getting additional damage. So that's why I'm recommending 4-piece Fanged Metal over Freedom Blues. Fanged Metal is 2-piece physical damage. It is 4-piece damage percent after assault is procced for 12 seconds. So if you trigger assault every 12 seconds, that's full uptime. It's just damage percent, but it's a lot of it, and it's just quite good. Recommended 2-piece set options are Freedom Blues, which is anomaly proficiency, Puffer Electro, which is pen percent, Hormone Punk, which is attack percent. If you play with any pen percent, more pen percent is always going to be the best option. But otherwise, Freedom Blues and Hormone Punk are similar, but Freedom Blues is better unless you're already maxing Jane's attack percent conversion, or Jane's flat attack conversion, I should say. Do you like pulling? Have you been to the land of Fontaine? Are you the French? Oui, oui. Croissant.
Huh? That's kind of racist. We'll talk later.
Yeah, Jane has a triple effect, Mindscape Cinema level 1. So that's cool, I guess. Let's start by establishing the 3 effects of Jane's Mindscape Cinema 1. She gains an extra usage of Salcho Jump every passion state. Her physical anomaly buildup rate during passion is increased by 15%, and she gains 0.1 damage percent for each point of anomaly proficiency she has, up to 30%, so 300 anomaly proficiency, which is easy. If we were to assume that the anomaly buildup rate does not cause an extra assault, from the damage percent and the Salcho Jump, this should be 12 to 14% damage increase. If it does cause an extra, or a couple extra assaults, this can be up to 40%. The truth probably lays somewhere in the middle, very similar to GUN's M1, obviously on a bigger scale. It is technically unlikely for that 15% buildup rate to cause extra assault procs with her 5-star W engine, but you never know. Thresholds are different and complicated, and teams cause a lot of changes to occur for that, especially if there's another Fizz character, so yada yada. It's good. Speaking of it's good, Mindscape Cinema Level 2, assault crits ignore 15% of enemy defense. The assaults are always going to be critting because they're going to have 100% crit rate, so yeah. Additionally, the assault crits have their crit damage increased by additional 50%, so that brings it to 100%. Your assaults will now do more than double the amount of damage. Yeah, it's pretty good. Mindscape Cinema Level 3 does nothing. Mindscape Cinema Level 5 also does nothing. Mindscape Cinema Level 4 is when Assault or Disorder are triggered, all squad members gain 18% anomaly damage for 15 seconds. Yeah, that's good. It's another 18% for your anomaly stuff. Her Mindscape Cinema Level 6 is when Jane is in Passion. Her crit rate and crit damage increase by 20 and 40%, respectively. After Assault is triggered, she will automatically enter Passion. And when Assault crits, Jane will perform an additional attack that does 1,600% of her anomaly proficiency as damage. Now, what does this really mean? If you pull M6, you actually need to have crit stats on your anomaly pieces, is what it really means. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going to be pulling for Mindscape Cinema Level 6. Also, Mindscape Cinema Level 6 is absurdly expensive. Whew, but yes, it is technically very good. You could argue that her Mindscape Cinema levels are so good because, and her 5 S-Rank W engine are so good because Jane might be starting out in a lower place than GUN or Ellen, but we'll have to see. That's where I'm leaning, but again, we'll have to see on release. Pull carefully. I guess reminder if you're on the fence about pulling for a Mindscape Cinema level or a S-Rank W engine. S-Rank W engines are cheaper on average. The drop rate is higher, and it is a 75-25 instead of a 50-50. So that's cool. The base drop rate for a S-Rank W engine is 1%, by the way. Characters are 0.6%, which is the same as Genshin and Honkai Star Rail, but Genshin and Honkai Star Rail have 0.7% base rate for weapon. Zenless is 1%. So the weapons are considerably cheaper even than the other Hoyo games. Okay, talking fast, explaining stuff. Whew, we're almost done. Let's get through some of the final sections. We're talking about teams. So Jane's additional ability should always be active. What does this mean? You need to have either another anomaly character or a cop in the party. There are 4 characters in the current roster that can activate this. Seth, Chingy, Piper, or Grace. Your team will always have at least one of the 4. The one that I find the most recommendable, is Seth. So you're gonna do Seth, Jane, in a flex slot. Seth is a stun agent and a support agent. He gives Jane a shield. He gives Jane 100 anomaly proficiency. He builds daze, and he does build electric anomaly. He's awesome. He also debuffs build-up resistance by 20%, so all of your build-up is 20% more effective with him. He's great. I think Seth is fantastic. Because he takes the stun slot, we're not going to recommend a stunner for these teams, such as Chingy or Ambi, so we're not going to recommend those. So let's start with what I do recommend. On release, there's not a great other anomaly character to slot in. The easiest slot in is actually a support character. So you can do Jane, Seth, and Arena, or Jane, Seth, or Lucy. Those are what I think will be the most recommendable. And they're also the most energy cheap teams because you don't have to build multiple characters entirely. You can get away with skipping a bit. Also worth mentioning, when you play Seth, you should build impact percent on him for his slot 6. And his shield skills attack, so it's going to be impact percent, attack, and then either anomaly proficiency or attack again. Rina can be very difficult to play around. But if you can manage it, Rina's pen percent buff, and if you have her S rank W engine, the little Weeping Cradle, not to be confused with the Weeping Gemini, completely different W engines. I know, it's confusing. It makes me do a double take every time. Someone will ask me, hey, what do you think about Weeping Gemini on Jane? I'm like, what? The Rina engine? No, they're completely different. It's confusing. Anyway. It's completely unrelated tangent. Rina's buffs are short uptime at Mindscape Cinema level 0, but if you do have Mindscape Cinema level 1, Rina is significantly easier to play with, and generally speaking, the best option for those teams. That does not mean you have to have Mindscape Cinema level 1. You can work around Mindscape Cinema level 0. It's just a bit difficult and a bit awkward. A bit less awkward is Lucy. So Lucy uses a rank W engine called Kaboom the Cannon. Ba-boom! Kaboom the Cannon is great. It gives final attack percent, and it's full uptime on all 4 stacks when you play with Lucy. It's just great. Lucy also gives extra attack. She also contributes to Daze buildup. We love Lucy. What can I say? We love Lucy. Really simple, really effective, pretty low maintenance. It's good. Now, talking about things that are a bit more complicated, we need to talk about using a second Anomaly character. So something like Jane, Seth, Piper, or Jane, Seth, Grace. This is harder to play around and requires you to have both Anomaly characters fully built, but they should be very good. Since Jane's Nod status is a debuff, or her assault crits are a debuff, as long as Jane hits enemies once every assault proc, Piper's assaults can also crit. Piper is also a buffer. When Piper's power is at 20 or more stacks, she provides the entire party with damage bonus. And Piper's additional ability will be active because Jane is a physical agent. So that's cool and definitely works. Very similarly, Seth is an electric agent, so he activates Grace's additional ability, which is extra damage from shock. So you can definitely try to do Jane, Seth, Grace. If you've watched the tier list video, you know my problems with Grace. She's just not a very good support. She's very DPS. But Piper has the exact same problems. So I'm comfortable putting these two teams together. If you do play Grace, you can get some very big screenshot disorder damage, but you may just have difficulty getting that to happen often and having it be more useful than another character in that slot. But it's definitely usable and it's something I'm going to try on release. So if you are interested, check out my stream, twitch.tv/jstern25. I also stream here on YouTube. If you do not get Seth, you can actually just use a stun character. Because Jane specifically requires someone of the same faction or another Anomaly character, you're going to have a hard time using Anby without using, essentially another cop, which is not really, or an Anomaly character, which is not a great option, but Qingyi seems like she'll be an option. Jane can play as a more on-field hungry DPS, so Qingyi can provide, or can be a conflict of gameplay interest, but it may be worth trying, especially if you did miss Seth and did pull Qingyi. So you could do something like Jane, Qingyi, Nicole, or Jane, Qingyi, Rina. I mentioned Nicole just for the grouping, and you might as well, you can do it. Nicole also builds up a lot of Ether Anomaly, so cool. The team that I see people the most excited for is the team that I'm the most skeptical about. I'm sorry to be a buzzkill. I do not think Grace, Rina, Jane is very good. I just don't think it's very good. I don't think it's very recommendable. I don't like it. Cite all of the problems I have with Grace, and I also would cite the lack of days buildup in this team. This team does not have good days build up. It might do damage outside of stun, but it will really struggle and fall behind in damage as soon as you account for all the other variables. So I am really not a fan of Grace, Rena, Jane, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. We'll have to wait and see. That is Jane. That's the Rat Queen. XDD. Jane is pretty solid. She's our first S rank at limited Anomaly DPS. Anomaly is very complicated under the hood, but very simple in practice, where you just unga bunga proc as much Anomaly as you can. We'll have to wait and see how the damage works out. I am a little skeptical about damage output still, but again, I'm happy to be proven wrong, and Jane does have very good vertical investment options if you do feel the need, or if you are #1 Jane fan. So I think a lot of people are going to be very happy with Jane. I would cite this being very similar to Dot in Honkai Star Rail, where especially early on, it was quite a bit behind the traditional crit DPSs, but it caught up later and then fell behind again. I'd expect Anomaly to be very similar, but this is a different game, so we'll have to wait and see.